you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits. That's right, man. You tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits.
So I and all other GymWits listeners, I'm hoping, have been waiting for my new workout, which you promised me in a while back, and I have not received it yet.
You guys can't see Ryan's face,
here's the
but I don't
problem.
think he has it.
That episode hasn't been posted yet, so no listeners are waiting. It's just you.
Well, look.
And it's quite possible that this will go up before your new workout. So maybe you should be quiet until next week when I get to post people's new workout. Maybe you should listen to the podcast. If you did, you'd know what went up.
Oh, nice. No. I'll end this conversation by saying, look, I don't pay you to do nothing. In fact, I don't pay you at all.
That is true. Well, this is the first time we've all been together since the new year, right?
Yes.
This might not be the first time an episode's gone up in the new year with the three of us, but how have you been, Tony? How was your New Year's?
It was wonderful. Yeah, definitely different this year. It was so cold, so I didn't do anything. I didn't go out. I stayed at home, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, we did reference New Year's in the first podcast of the year, but I think we referenced that we recorded it before New Year's.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was brutally cold. Like, I did not want to go out. And
I think it was 4 degrees.
Yeah, something like that. Like, the wind chill was like 14 or something crazy.
Yeah, it was negatives, yeah.
Yeah, it was not fun. Yeah, now it's a little bit better. Like, we have 30s. So I can manage.
It's amazing how it feels warm outside.
Yeah, you get to that point in the winter.
It's 30 degrees and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I don't
I
have
know,
to
it's
put
funny.
my gloves on.
You went out at 30, it felt like it was summer.
Yeah, that's when you know you're in the middle of winter, when you like look at the forecast and it's 30 degrees. It's like, yes. I'm like, okay, I only need to wear 5 layers today.
Yeah. So what do we have on the agenda for today?
We've been, with our format, we don't always get to all of our Ask the Trainer, and we've got quite a few Ask the Trainer and Ask the Dietitian questions. And since we have the three of us here, figured let's put some stuff together, and we can knock out a bunch of these because we've got people waiting since early December or before to have their questions answered. So we've got a combined Ask the Trainer and Ask the Dietitian.
We have an Ask the Episode.
Ask the Episode. So Justin will ask the questions, and Tony and I will try to answer. And fire away. What's the first question?
All right, so first we have an Ask the Dietitian question. Tony, you get to answer.
Yay.
And it comes from Marina. And Marina asks, hello, I had a question about calories versus macros. If you had 3 different people who had the same calorie intake, but one had most calories coming from fat, one had most calories coming from complex carbs, and one from simple sugars, would they still be able to achieve the same weight loss goals? Or does it just come down to calories in versus calories out?
Wow. So I don't think she realizes that her question is basically like, which diet is best? Like what the whole, diet industry is kind of made out of is like, should you just do no carb? Should you do high fat? Should you do, all these different types of diets? But, so I guess there's 2 answers to that question. So yes, calories in, calories out, it does matter. The types of calories that you're consuming matter as well, though. And usually each person's going to find different successes with different diets. But so I think I've mentioned this on a previous podcast before. Maybe it was a Ask the Dietitian similar to this. But so macronutrients, maybe I just have to define this because I think it's a really big trend. We've never really defined. So I don't even think, sometimes I think people use the term macros and they don't even know what they're talking about. So let's start there. So macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, fat, and water. But as you know, water doesn't carry calories. So when you break down your protein, your fat, and your carbohydrates, there definitely needs to be balance, and there has to be a deficit if the goal is weight loss, or it has to be an excess if the goal is weight gain or maintenance to achieve maintenance. Now, all of those different food groups are going to also have micronutrients, unless it's something like carbohydrates, which is simple carbohydrates that have what dietitians will call empty calories, which don't have nutrients, something like white bread versus whole grain bread. White bread has carbohydrates, same amount of carbohydrates as whole grain bread, but there's no micronutrients aren't there. So for long-term success and long-term maintenance, I encourage people to not just balance their macros in whichever way that is for them, but to also choose nutrient-dense foods so their body's also getting supplied with the micronutrients, so that way they don't come into deficiencies along the line. That way it can help cut cravings, and they won't, it's easier to sustain. So the balance of your macros matter. And the type and quality of them matter. So I don't think it's just calories in, calories out.
And it's a great question, Marina, and thank you so much
thank you
for
asking.
writing in. And it's funny because in a few weeks, I believe after this episode will be posted first, we have just completed an interview that discusses this a little bit. Calories in, calories out versus other factors. And you'll find out that those other factors, because you included in the question excluding variables like exercise, metabolism, but we see that some of those other variables may play a bigger role than we know. So stay tuned for the interview that we have coming up on a book called The Secret Life of Fat by Dr. Sylvia Tara. A fascinating interview that everyone will enjoy.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Marina, for writing in. All right, so our next question comes from Hobby RX. Now, does that mean that Hobby RX is a hobbyist doctor or pharmacist or something like that? I wonder.
That's the name.
Because right?
Hobby. Yeah, that's
I wonder. All right, so he says background.
I'm assuming it's a he.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't know. I'm just asking.
No, it's true.
Is Hobby a male name?
I don't know. Maybe Hobby is a name. That's a cool name. I think I'm going to name my kid Hobby. Maybe that's what it is.
I think it's a business.
Yeah.
There we go.
So. Anyway, let's get to the question.
All right. So background. I'm on a roll. Have a workout plan, a goal, and an understanding of my calories and macros. There we go with those macros again. My workout routine as a beginner attempting to lose 40 pounds, 6'3", 36 years old. I'm going to assume that it's a he. Right? May not be, but right. I'm going to go with the odds on this one. Tony, what do you think?
We don't know.
All right. So Hobby RX is 6'3", 36 years old. He's starting at 260 pounds, and he says endpoint 220 by April 15th. Down by 6 pounds as of today. Now I don't know what today is. But we'll assume that...
January 11th.
January 11th. Okay, great. So the current schedule is MWF weight training.
Wednesday, Friday.
Right. Alternating... I'm just reading word for word. I get in trouble when I don't. Alternating upper and lower each day. Finishing W/a short cardio burst. Jumping jacks first, 10 minutes, 20-second burst, 40-second rest. And then, all right, skip to the question already. The question is, should your diet, calories, macros, reflect the effort for each day in isolation, or should the diet remain consistent regardless of work versus rest?
Great question. Overall, you definitely want a consistent. So however you calculated your calories. Sorry, I'm still trying not to laugh because
we're having a grand old time here.
Justin is just comical. Okay. Okay. Anyways, overall, you want whatever your calorie needs are. If you're trying to lose weight, there should be a caloric deficit each day. So I don't know what you had calculated your calorie needs to be, but you do want it to be consistent most days of the week. The days that you do exercise, you might want to factor in something small like before your workout and post-workout, but overall your calorie needs should be pretty consistent. On the days you exercise, it could vary slightly because you need that food for fuel, but overall you want to keep it consistent.
Hope that answers your question, Hobby RX. And once again, thank you for writing in. We really do appreciate questions. And so our next question comes from Claire. And Claire says, hey, team, hope you're well. I seriously love your podcasts, and they've reminded me of the holistic nature of fitness. So I had two questions which I was hoping you'd be able to give me some advice on. Firstly, I'll provide you some background on me, because I know you like the background. I was a competitive swimmer for my whole teenage years up until 19 years old, and then stopped for my university degree. So I have a really strong understanding and foundation of strength, fitness, motivation, nutrition, etc. So since stopping my swimming career for the last 2 years, I have just done heaps of cardio to maintain really great cardiovascular fitness, but have neglected strength work, which I know is really bad. However, 4 months ago, I got glandular fever, meaning I couldn't exercise for that whole time and consequently lost my muscular endurance and a bit of muscle mass. During my illness, I discovered your podcasts and since then have been re-inspired to approach my fitness goals with an orientation towards strength because I want to get stronger again and be more holistically healthy. Now that I don't have a coach to guide me, I was hoping you'd be able to assist in these 2 questions before I get back into exercise. 1, based off your podcast, I'd like to do 3 strength sessions per week, plus 2 or 3 sessions of cardio. In the first month of restarting my exercise, should I be focusing on whole body exercises in these strength sessions to refamiliarize my body with strength and power and prevent injury? Then after a month, start focusing on isolating muscle groups in each session. And then the second question is, should I focus on building a strong core in this initial month? Because coming from a swimming background, I know the importance of a good core to stabilize the rest of your body. Which sort of exercise will help this? Because I know just doing crunches, planks, and sit-ups won't suffice. Thanks, guys. Keep up what you're doing. You're awesome.
Okay, great. So this is a really, really great pair of questions. My answer to the first question would be, firstly, since you're an athlete and exercise is not new to you, I wouldn't worry too much about starting slow or starting with general kind of strength. The only time I would say yes is if the muscles atrophied and your strength diminished so much to the point that it's a limitation or it's interfering with your regular everyday activities. So if you've almost injured yourself or if you're really weak in certain areas, then you may need to start from scratch. But otherwise, you can pretty much get close to what you were doing pre-illness without much of a problem. Again, especially coming from an athletic background. So I would just say that, again, unless there was so much atrophy and so much weakness that you really, lifting 1 pound or 2 pound dumbbells is a challenge, I would say with pretty good confidence that you can go back to your normal routine. So I would say I would go, but just start slower than than you would. But I think you can get right back into it. As for the core, the core should be strengthened all the time. But you want to think about your core, as we've talked about before. Crunches and planks are fine, but they're not the be all to end all. And realistically, you want to think of your core as it's a belt around your trunk that is keeping you stable while you're doing movements. So for me, I try to emphasize core work within other exercises, especially for athletes. So it's really about engaging the core while you're doing movements, that are related to your sports or your activities. It's about staying balanced and controlled and when you're moving dynamically. So, what I'll do with this episode is I'm going to make a note to add some exercises to go along with it, some good core exercises. But for me, when I think of core, I think of things that are more dynamic, and it's more, again, it's about engaging your trunk while you're doing movements. And, and especially for athletes at higher levels, it's while you're doing dynamic movements where you're off balance or, it's not in a single, that is multiplanar. So you're moving in different ranges and different planes of motion. So it's not so much that you're isolating the core, because at the end of the day, you can do all kinds of advanced kinds of planks, but you're still just isolating that area. It's about that area activating while you're doing other exercises. I think that's really where you want to focus on your core. And especially, again, being an athlete, being somebody who's into fitness, you can start to incorporate that into everyday movements. Unless, again, if the core is a weakness, if there's a pre-existing injury, you may need to isolate it. But otherwise, it's something that you can really start developing within your regular, workout routine.
So I actually have a follow-up that maybe Claire might appreciate this information. I'm wondering for myself as well. So since Claire's goal is strength and sort of strengthening her muscles in her body, maybe she might want to focus on full body strength exercises in general, more squat type exercises, full body exercises, as opposed to, say, a dumbbell, a bicep curl, things like that. Do you think that is that something that she might want to approach?
I mean, it's really person specific. I think if that was part of the program and that's what she liked doing, then keep doing what you like doing if it's effective for you. So, of course, I think that full body multiplanar exercises are going to be generally, more useful or more, quote, functional. But really, it's, what works for the person. And so let's say she likes doing bench presses and bicep curls and push downs, then keep doing it. It's just really a matter of, what works for her. And again, somebody being an athlete already, I tend to be less strict or less like you got to, you don't switch what you're doing. If you like what you're doing and it's effective, keep doing it. Okay. That's the only area where it's like, do what works.
She did mention though that she wasn't really doing a lot of strength
Oh,
training.
sorry. Yeah.
She did say that.
That
like
is
how she would neglected strength training and would mostly do cardio. And
okay, no, that's a great point. So if you're going to, so as an athlete, like from your athletic background, if you were doing strength training before, and you enjoyed what you were doing, then go back to that. But if you weren't doing strength training then as well, and you're getting back into the strength training, then I would say a mix of full body exercises and isolation exercises will be good. And so, if you're weaker and you're starting a strength training routine, a mix will help because you do need to build the individual muscles, but you're building them individually to work in unison as a unit. So then it depends on the level. Again, it goes back to, it depends on the level of atrophy. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I don't think it's necessary to start with one type of program and then graduate to the next. I think it's more start lighter weights and then you can start to increase your weights when you're shifting. And again, if we haven't answered properly, then definitely shoot us an email and we'll do part two answer to that question.
So our next question comes from Martin, and Martin asks, "Hey guys, I'm from Scotland and a huge fan of the podcast." Once again, Martin, thank you for writing in. I'll get right into it. I'm 23, 5'9", 80 kilograms, and I have a very active lifestyle. I play amateur rugby, train twice a week, and play games on the weekends. I also train at the gym 4 times a week, mainly strength training. A couple of years ago, I injured my back doing bunny hops at a rugby session, and ever since, I have been managing the injury. I have seen numerous physiotherapists and chiropractors, he puts in parentheses, trying everything, but nothing long-term works. I go through a stretch routine every day for my hips, glutes, and hamstrings and quads, made up from numerous exercises I've learned over the years, and I have become quite flexible around that area. However, I will go through spells of feeling good and being able to perform heavy deadlifts, squats, etc. But then every now and then I will move the wrong way and something seems to pop in my lower back and I find myself unable to move and in serious pain and discomfort. I have 2 questions. Will I ever get to a point where I can be pain-free and not worry when the pain will come back? And what exercises in particular can be done to strengthen my lower back, hips to prevent or at least limit the chances of this happening again? Long-winded, but any help would be much appreciated. All the best, Martin.
So, Martin, it's a good question. It might be slightly beyond my scope to really give too much. I will say this. Well, first I want to say I love Scotland. I've been to Scotland's beautiful and probably the most beautiful country I've ever been to. I don't know why I would want to say that. So beautiful country. I can't wait to go back. Anyway, back to my answering your question. So it's a little bit on my scope because again, when you're dealing with pain and injuries, as a trainer, my goal as a trainer is to help improve your fitness, help improve your cardiovascular strength, your performance. But since I'm not a physiotherapist or physical therapist, for me, it's a little bit beyond me to give you too much advice on how to manage the pain. So what I will say is, a big issue, and this might require going, I know you've been to physiotherapists. It may require you going to other people and getting second opinions, especially getting people who have experience with injuries. One thing I would say is I have a guy that I work with, and and I really think I really high respect. Unfortunately, he's in New York, but part of the issue is there are 2 parts to your injury. So right, you have let's say you have pain somewhere, anywhere, right? the part one is you have the pain. And so for a lot of people, they're going to isolate that area and say, okay, where's the pain coming from? And they're going to look at that area and say, okay, what's going on in that area? And often that's not the source. And you need to kind of take a step back and look at things more, look at your overall movement and look at the quality of your movement and try to identify where in your own personal kind of movement patterns, where are there errors? Where are there deficiencies? And then once you identify the deficiencies, you correct that. And then by correcting that over time, you can correct where the pain is. Where, if let's say you have a knee problem, someone might look at it and say, okay, here's what's wrong with your knee. And so they focus on the knee and they focus on the knee and they focus on the hamstrings and, the calves and the glutes a little bit. And they do everything they can to correct that. But maybe there's an issue with just your overall movement, that something wrong with your gait or something wrong with how you jump, or when you run, you do something, and they're not identifying that. So while they're putting all this work and effort into that one area, that one joint, they're not fixing the source of the injury. And so if they're not fixing the source of the injury, it's going to keep coming back. So, that's where I say, it's in addition to what the kind of acute problems are, there may be a real source that people aren't identifying. And so it might be worth seeing other people to get a second opinion. I'll actually ask my friend, maybe he knows somebody in Scotland or somewhere in the UK that could help. But I think that's one issue and one thing where I've seen physical therapists that take that approach, but I've seen a lot that don't. And that their kind of focus is a little bit more on just treating what the pain is and where the injury is. And again, you need somebody who can kind of take that step back and really look at your the overall quality of your movement and try to say, okay, this is wrong, and maybe if we correct this, it'll fix it. So I know I'm not giving you, may not be the answer you want, but when you're dealing with professionals and when you're dealing with, and this, you can find these qualities in not only in your physiotherapist, but your strength coaches, your strength and conditioning coaches, your athletic trainers, anybody that you're working with, their approach needs to be to look at how you're moving and try to enhance the quality of your movement before, in addition to, I guess, identifying what the injuries are or what the problems are. So, when it comes to the, lower back and the hips, again, there are a few things to do. And, I guess I'm going to make a note of this now to add hip and lower back exercises. But, just, again, this is just overall in general, the psoas or the hip flexors tend to be an area where that are directly related to the lower back. And so often if that's really, really tight, there's kind of a chain reaction, and the chain reaction causes a weaker core and tighter lower back, and you end up with lower back pain. That doesn't happen with everybody, but it's a pretty common thing. So, again, not diagnosing your injury, but definitely stretching the hip flexors can help. Making sure that your glutes are strong is also an important thing. Often with athletes, there's not enough focus on the glutes. And so if you don't have enough focus on the glutes, the hamstrings and lower back tend to take over for the glutes on movements, especially when you're driving, when you're running or jumping. And so I think glute strength is really important. Low back hip flexors, flexibility is important. Core strength, overall core stability is really important. But like I said, also just the quality of your movement is really important. So I'll try to include some exercises that just I tend to find are really good for working those areas. But you're going to need, my best advice for you is to find somebody whose approach is to look at how you move and then make corrections to your overall movement patterns, and not just identifying and treating injuries to areas, because that might help you with the areas, but as soon as you get back to sports, the movement patterns will exacerbate whatever the problems you have. So you end up in this cycle of injury, injury, fix injury, injury, fix injury anytime you get back to sports. So again, same, with anything, please follow up. Let us know if this helps. If it doesn't help, if you found somebody, like I said, if I can find somebody in the UK that I trust, or if you are in the UK and you agree with this and you trust, shoot us an email and I will definitely try to get back to you, Martin, and hopefully help you out. Yeah.
So Martin, I'll just include something as well. I've been there. I've had lower back pain. It sucks. And you asked the question, well, you get to a point where you can be pain-free. Probably not the answer that you want to hear, but that may never happen, right? You want to mention something?
Well, I just have a question, and I kind of think it goes, because the one thing he asked is, like, he'll go back to lifting heavy deadlift, squats, and then it happens again. So my question is like, two questions, I guess. One is, maybe he just has to recognize when when's too much of that weight. And then second to that, if he can't ever get to the point where he can lift heavy again, can he do those same exercises and maybe more reps of them or something? Like, what would you recommend for someone who does have an injury and can't lift weights but still wants to improve their exercise in some way?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So that's the issue is sometimes, if there's an injury, if there's an issue, sometimes the heavy lifting just does not mesh well with it. And so there are two issues with the heavy weight training, and that's a great point that I had in my head to talk about, and that you make sure you're doing it properly, like that you're supervised, and that just like I mentioned the movement patterns, because I was referring more to the rugby, but when you're lifting, that you're doing that right, and that you're doing it with proper form, and that you progress properly, and it might mean that you need to do more warm-up reps, or you need more rest in between workouts, or you need to lower the weight. So one thing to do with your weight training might be to try to play with the weights. Like, let's say you have your max, and play with how close you can get to those weights. Well, one is do it with proper form, but assuming the form is right, you play with the weights you can get to before that really bothers your back. And it might be that you just need to stay at a lower rep range than you'd like in order to keep the back healthy. The other thing is, just for some people, full range of motion just doesn't always work. I know people love doing full squats, and I don't know if this is you, but it might not be the best for you. So you may need to play with the range, play with the weights, play with your repetition ranges to kind of figure out what works. And then the other thing, just jumping on what Justin said with will the pain come back, because I realized I didn't even answer that, is having worked with many clients with lower back pains and lower back problems, they tend to be chronic to an extent. But if you, with proper exercise, it's not that you can eliminate the problems altogether. I think it'd be unfair to say to anybody that you'll never have back pain again. But with proper exercise, I think there are three really important things you can do. You can lengthen the time in between episodes. You can minimize the pain when you do have a problem, and you can shorten the time when it does come up. And so that's what I've learned with clients, over 15 years or 16 years, dealing with clients that have lower back problems, which is a very common thing, is that, again, with proper training, proper care, proper rehab, proper prehab, you can really do those three things. So that's what you're really looking to do, is lessen the intensity, lengthen the time between episodes, and shorten the time when you do have an episode. So I don't want to say you won't have it, but again, the right training will get those three things, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, Martin, stay strong, brother. There's a lot of us suffering from a similar afflictions, but you'll get through it. All right, so our next question comes from Brad, and Brad asks, recently discovered your podcast and I'm loving it. Well, thank you, Brad. I've been lifting for about 5 years, and I noticed that the particularly tough workouts, my body temperature, notice that after particularly tough workouts, my body temperature feels elevated for several hours after I finish my workout, making it hard to sleep. Sometimes taking Advil will help bring my temperature back down, but do you have any idea why this might happen, or have any recommendations for preventing or curing it? Thank you for your time, Brad.
You have any thoughts, Tony, before I answer?
I don't know. That's a new one for me. I've never. I almost want to ask: Is he sure he's not sick? Because how long prolonged after? I guess.
Yeah, I would wonder the length and what is it, literally the body temperature, or you feel that. So I think there obviously
when you take your temperature, is it elevated or you just feel hot?
So one thing in my experience with people, there are hormones released when you exercise that do increase, that work to increase your metabolism, increase the fat burning going on in the body. So and your heart rate is elevated. And that may last. So typically the heart rate goes back down, 30 minutes or so, you tend to cool back down to a normal level. But it could be that, again, if it's a tough workout, depending on what it is, your heart rate's elevated, you've got these hormones going, endorphins are rushing. It's not uncommon, in my experience, to have people who have a hard time sleeping after a workout. So I definitely have seen that before. The issue is, I don't know that it's something that you can correct, and I've never read anything about that being something you can correct. It just might be your response to exercise. I deal with a similar thing when I exercise intensely. I'll give you for me, it's like when I spar, the the level of exertion is such that the things are going for hours after I spar, and it tends to only happen then. And I think part of it's that I hold my breath. I'm tense. There's anxiety, so it's just this rush. And so it's really hard for me to come back down on those days. So, it sounds like a similar thing. It's not uncommon to have that happen. It's just that you might need to either work out earlier or go to sleep later and try to work your schedule so that you're built into your schedule is a couple hour buffer period for you to go back to sleep. So again, I don't think it's anything serious. My own thing is like, is it your body temperature? Or do you just feel warmer and feel, wired? And if it's that, it's not a big problem, not a problem. It's just a matter of, you're probably going to have to, again, give yourself a little more time, or, schedule your really tough workouts, so that you have a bit of a buffer period before going to sleep.
Brad, hope that answers your question. If there are any follow-ups, feel free to write us in, and we will be happy to do a part 2. So our next question comes from Isabel, and she writes, "Hello, my name is Isabel. I am from Europe, from Porto, Portugal." Well, great to know that we have some listeners in Portugal.
I hate to be that guy, but I was in Portugal last year. I was in Lisbon, and I love Portugal. It's beautiful.
Scotland. He loves Portugal. He's also been to Thailand. Let's rub it in some more.
To travel.
Where I haven't been to Europe in 2 years.
I like to travel. Yeah. There's this place Sintra that I forget the name of the complex, but there was like this amazing well that you go like underground, or you go down, and it was like the coolest thing ever.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So anyhow, Isabel writes, "I recently returned to the gym. I have been doing weight training initially with a general plan, and after a minor injury on my biceps, I hired a personal trainer, Angelo Fernandez. He is a professional hockey player, and he's really good. To get the most out of our sessions and my training, I began searching the net for fitness advice. I found your blog and have been listening to your podcast, which I find really, really good. So I hear this podcast where Justin talked about feeling better after training. I am also a musician. I am a composer and singing and a music expression teacher. I recently finished my master's in composition. I find that one of the biggest challenges for musicians in maintaining emotional balance, because when you compose and perform on a regular basis, you help other people process their emotional expression and also process your own. I think that is why a lot of musicians end up trapped in drugs. I notice with people who do a lot of sports that they seem to have a better emotional balance. So my question to you guys would be, could you explore the subject of achieving emotional balance through fitness, and why do people who play a lot of sports seem to be more emotionally balanced as a whole? Another subject would be, I believe strength training helps prevent most of musicians' ailments, tendinitis, etc. I don't understand why training is not part of a musician's curriculum on a college level. I heard a podcast where you explored training for a pianist. Could you further explore the subject of musician-friendly exercise? Thank you very much for your time and attention. Isabel. All right, so quite a bit in there. The first thing that I will say in regards to emotional health with fitness is that for many of us, it helps because it relieves anxiety. This is proven. It relieves anxiety. It increases endorphins, etc. These sort of feel-good chemicals and hormones in your body. So that might help regulate your emotions. I don't know, Ryan, is that safe to say that's accurate? So that might be a reason. As far as getting into the subject of why people who play a lot of sports might be emotionally sort of stronger as opposed to artists, that might be a chicken or the egg type deal. First off, I get for me, the jury is out because we see a lot of people in sports who have lots of emotional problems as well. And I don't know if the activity is what causes emotional issues, but maybe that the person is drawn to the activity. So a lot of artists tend to be hyper emotional people. That's just sort of how we made. Once again, I don't have science or data to back this up. This is from personal experience, and so people that might have emotional issues get into the arts, and unfortunately, people that have emotional issues may also turn to drugs or alcohol in order to help sort of make themselves feel better. As far as sports, perhaps just throwing it out there, that perhaps sports gives you a very regimented system. You have a coach, you have a team, you have a training method, and perhaps those things help with sort of regulating your life, while artists tend to have schedules that are all over the place. So that is my piece on that. As far as the exercises for musicians, artists that have to use they're athletes of sorts, right? If you play an instrument, it's a physical exercise, right? If you are a sculptor, that is a physical exercise. So that is definitely something we would like to talk about in the future.
I would say all these subjects are things I have on our list of like topics. So I think they're really interesting, and I wanted to go answer this question now because I just don't know when we will explore them. But they're all things that we will try to explore in detail. Do you have any thoughts on the questions, Tony?
Well, I think that this is a wonderful, well thought out question. I actually really enjoyed even just like listening to the different perspectives. One thing that definitely came to mind with kind of what Justin was saying was, I know that growing up playing sports my most of my life, I did have that regimen. I was responsible for my team. I had a coach guiding me. I grew up where, with my sister who started in that path and then went a different path. And definitely you could see there was huge differences in our lives and our choices. And we're both, successful now, but there was definitely a big difference because she didn't, finish out with sports and stuff. And I think that sports really do play a bigger role in just structure and responsibility. So that might be kind of that reason why maybe the emotional balance, because you have other people depending on you, especially if it's a team-related sport. Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll mention one thing before give Ryan the his response on the matter. That certain emotional afflictions may be medical as well, and those can impact people from all walks of life, and we see that it has. So if it's something that you find that you're struggling with, definitely do some research into that as well. I know that many people have such as issues as anxiety is something that really plagues pretty much everyone in the world. So fitness, health, sports can help with that, but there may be deeper issues in which, of course, we would always recommend seeing professional help on that matter.
And so the answer, in a way, the question answers itself because it's about balance. And so we think about our lives. There's, physical, obviously we're physical and we're mental and we're emotional beings. And it's important to find the balance between all of that. If you're only purely emotional, that can be problematic. If you're purely physical, that can be problematic. If you're purely mental, purely academic, that can be an issue. So I think, as in general, I think we grow up as kids where academics are placed at a high, of high importance. Every parent, they want their kids to do well in school. They want their kids to have a happy and successful life. But if you do that to the detriment of your physical capabilities, then there's a release you don't get. There's development that you don't get. There's a social part that you potentially don't get. So I think that sports to a large extent, like you guys mentioned, it gives you that social outlet. It gives you a focus. It gives you structure. There's self-esteem that comes with it, with being a good athlete.
You almost have to force to change your diet too to perform better. And nutrition is huge when it comes to emotion. Yeah,
exactly. So I think in a lot of ways it teaches you how to deal with life. And so I think that sports really does lead to a balanced life. Now, where it becomes problematic is if you have like an overbearing parent. And where they put their expectations are higher than they should be. So you can see where there are times where sports will go too far, or if somebody just plays too much sports and they do that and they don't emphasize enough academics or their social life. So you can see it be a negative thing. But I think in general, and then there are also cognitive benefits to physical activity. Sure. So I think it's just that sports and activity are a part of a balanced life, especially when you're an adult. So for many adults, like we have to exercise because we're not physically, we don't lead physically active lives outside of it. And then many of us have to exercise because we don't play sports. But if you play sports, you don't have to do as much of the other exercise because the sport becomes your exercise. So at the end of the day, fitness and exercise is us making up for the fact that we're sedentary beings.
I don't want to get to harp on Isabel's language. She might mean sports as fitness as an all-encompassing thing.
Yeah, well, either way,
that's
just I'm saying that. But no, I would disagree. I think that she means sports as sports.
As an
I could be wrong, but I think that. But there's a benefit to having it because there's a social benefit. Like if you join a kickboxing gym, again, it's like we talk about CrossFit. CrossFit's a perfect example because CrossFit's the sportization of fitness, right? That's what everything you get in a sport, being on a team, being with a group of friends, people that motivate you, numbers, statistics,
more
goals,
than you thought you could.
all those things you get in CrossFit, where before you didn't get that in a gym, or maybe some people did, but they had to kind of work it together, where CrossFit kind of is built around that. It's like being on a team. So I think there's a huge value in sports to balance, and even adults that I know that are fit. I can't tell you how many people I know that took up a sport or took up an activity and loved it. Again, that's why CrossFit's so much fun, because you have a lot of people who never or didn't play sports as adults, or just did soccer until they were 12 and never played anything, and all of a sudden like this gives them that feeling. So there's really an emotional release that you get from playing sports that I would recommend anybody, no matter the age, that you find something you like, whether it's tennis or softball or basketball or whatever. Like find it, because I think sports it definitely brings balance. I think for me, when I had gotten out of college, I remember playing softball, and I loved playing softball because I needed an athletic outlet, and it was so much fun. And then I stopped doing that, and it was like, I can remember the difference of I needed something. Then I got into kickboxing, and again, that was my sport. I need something. So I think anybody can benefit from that, as long as you're not so competitive that like you need to be the best, and if you're not the best, it drives you crazy and kills you. But yeah, I think that answers. Was there another part to that question?
Just talking, Isabel mentioned exercises for artists that have to use their their hands or their body as part of their job, as part of their craft.
So I would say there are three things, three maybe more. That
certainly something we'd love. to
I think this is a podcast in its own. So I think we'll definitely try to get a podcast, and maybe with an expert who deals with that. But I think there are things that do get neglected. I think if you're an artist or a musician that deals with like a wind instrument, like breath training exercises, I think would be hugely important. How do you control your breath is a hugely important thing. If you're,
I found that grip exercises, weights have helped me to play guitar, that I have more stamina than, and I've, knock on wood, have prevented any injury to my hands over the years.
So the other thing would be, depending on the joints being used, exercises dealing with the kind of neuromuscular control of those joints, because obviously if you're playing guitar, there's control that's necessary. There's also muscle endurance. So you've got those two things that are really important. That should be worked on. And I think they're also like prehabilitation exercises, so you avoid things like carpal tunnel, tendonitis, areas that might be affected by that repetitive movement. Again, if you're a high level musician, you're doing the same thing over and over and over, and over time that can cause a problem. So kind of training to identify what are the common injuries with that skill and how to prevent it, I think are really important. And then there is a focus, like, if you're playing an instrument, I think it requires a lot of focus, right? And so I think another important thing is, I'm sure there are kind of cognitive exercises that I don't know of yet, but we'll try to work out, but that things are going to help you focus intensely, especially if you're trying to learn or a piece or learn a skill that, allow you to focus and practice and put in the work that's necessary.
Exercise helps with your focus, actually helps you work on a piece. If you're composing, if you're learning a piece, that's what I found from my experience.
So I think those are that would be my thought on these questions. I definitely may make for great episodes, and I definitely have it on our kind of queue of things to come up with and research and talk about, because I'm sure there's a lot of information out there. But I definitely wanted to get to the question now, because who knows when, it might be a few months down the road before we really can tackle these subjects. But that's great.
Yes. Thank you, Isabel, for writing in.
Yeah, and if you have ideas for us, definitely let us know. Like we'll talk about anything if we can relate it back to fitness. And Justin will talk about anything, period. So, or he will relate.
He's trying.
He will relate fitness into anything. So
he's tried to make episodes over non-nutrition fitness related things many a times.
And again, he'll make things go off the rails. So if you have an idea for Justin to go off the rails, you can send us that too. So anyway, all of our stuff is at the GymWits. GymWits at TheGymWits.com is where you can find all of our stuff. Social media, Ask the Trainer. If you have more questions, we love the questions. And the more Ask the Trainer stuff we get, the more of these that we get to put out. We love answering your questions, and we get some really fun, interesting, cool questions. And I love, just to add to that, like I love the detail that people send. It's not just like, what are my macros? Like they're actually giving us their information. So I really enjoy that. And it means a lot to me, because it means that you're putting some faith into us that you're able to send that kind of information. So I guess that's it. Where can people find you, Tony?
On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or I have a new podcast, Tips with Tony.
Yes, definitely check out the Tips with Tony
Subscribe,
podcast.
please. Yeah, because so we will be posting the Tips with Tony podcast in our feed, but we really want you guys, not for a long time. So we want you to subscribe to the Tips with Tony podcast. So it's separate. So if you subscribe to the GymWits and you want Tips with Tony, you're gonna, you gotta make sure to subscribe to the Tips with Tony podcast in iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thanks for writing in, guys. Occasionally we'll continue to do these Ask the Trainer, Ask the Dietitian.
We'll do it as much as you ask us questions.
As much as you ask us questions.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'm waiting for Ryan to close the show.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I was going to start it.
Yeah. So I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, a registered dietitian.
And we are
the GymWits.